The town of Harrow Creek, Alberta, had made up its mind about Josephine Hartwell before she turned 25. Small towns work that way. They take a person's most inconvenient qualities and file them down into a single sentence, and then they repeat that sentence until it becomes the truth. In Josephine's case, the sentence was this: she was too particular. Too particular about how the lumber was cut at her father's mill. Too particular about the accounts, which she kept herself in a ledger that was more precise than anything the previous bookkeeper had managed in 20 years of trying. Too particular about the men who had attempted to court her, both of them, each of whom had departed Harrow Creek with the distinct impression that Josephine Hartwell was not a woman who could be satisfied, and that this was somehow her failing rather than theirs. She was 28 years old. She had been running Hartwell Lumber since her father's eyesight began failing him 3 winters ago, when the print in the ledgers became too small, and the splinters in the yard became invisible until they were already in his hand. She had not taken over the mill the way some daughters take over a father's business, reluctantly and with apologies. She had taken it over the way someone picks up a thing that belongs to them. Directly, without ceremony. She had learned the grades of timber from a reference book she ordered from a publisher in Toronto, because Harrow Creek did not have the kind of library that stocked such things for women. She had learned the market rates and the shipping contracts, and the particular temperament of the mill's foreman, a large, quiet man named Douglas, who had worked for her father for 15 years and who had, after a period of careful observation, decided that she knew what she was doing, and treated her accordingly. She was 5 feet 9 inches tall, which was notable anywhere in 1889, and particularly notable in a northern Alberta mill town, where height in a woman was treated as a minor eccentricity, like a strong handshake or a direct opinion. She had dark auburn hair she kept in a practical braid and hands that were, as she once told a neighboring merchant who asked if she found the work hard on them, exactly as capable as she needed them to be. The town's verdict about her particularity had accumulated over years the way verdicts do in small places. Not announced, not deliberate, simply repeated in the careful way of people who believe they are observing rather than judging, until the observation becomes the judgment and the judgment becomes the fact. Josephine Hartwell was too particular for any man in Harrow Creek. She had too many standards. She knew too much about too many things. She would never be satisfied. Josephine had her own assessment of this, which she kept largely to herself. Her assessment was that the men she had encountered had been not quite enough, and that not quite enough was a reasonable thing to decline, and that declining it was not the same as being impossible to please. She was particular the way a person is particular, when they know what a thing is supposed to look like and can tell the difference between that and what they are being offered. She was not entirely at peace with her situation either. She knew that. In the evenings when the mill was quiet and the accounts were balanced and the Alberta dark came down over the creek and the pines, she was aware of a particular kind of stillness that was not quite the same as contentment. There was something she had not found. She could not have described its shape precisely. She had stopped expecting to find it in Harrow Creek, which had shown her most of what it contained. She was wrong about that. He came on a Tuesday in March. His name was Everett Crane, and he had come to Harrow Creek because the railway survey crew operating out of Edmonton had sent him ahead as their supply and logistics man, the person responsible for establishing accounts with local suppliers and negotiating the contracts that would feed and equip the crew for the season's work. He had done this kind of advance work for 4 years in 3 provinces, and he was good at it in the particular way of a person who is both methodical and quick, who can read a situation and a ledger with equal facility, and who does not waste time on things that do not matter. He came to Hartwell Lumber on his first morning in town because the railway needed timber, and the timber was here. He pushed open the office door at 8:30. Josephine was at the standing desk by the window, reviewing the week's cutting orders. She did not look up immediately, which was not rudeness. It was the behavior of someone who finishes what she is doing before she starts something else. When she did look up, he saw a woman of considerable height in a gray wool dress with a canvas work apron, dark auburn hair pinned back with the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who pins their hair to keep it out of the way and not for any other reason. Brown eyes, sharp and evaluating. Hands resting on the ledger that suggested she was comfortable with the ledger and with everything else in the room. "Morning," she said. "What can I do for you?" "Everett Crane," he said. "Advance liaison for the Northern Rail Survey. I need to discuss timber contracts for the season." She picked up her pencil. "Crane," she said. "Spell it." He spelled it. She wrote it without looking at him, then looked up. "Quantities," he told her. She wrote those down too, with the ease of someone whose pencil moves quickly because her mind has already moved ahead. "We operate on monthly invoicing," she said. "Payment expected within 30 days of delivery. We don't carry accounts past 60. "That's standard," he said. No difficulty there. Their eyes met. There was nothing performed about it on either side. Two people taking the measure of each other with the directness of people who do not see a reason not to. "You've done this kind of work before," she said. It was not a question. 4 years, he said. "Manitoba before this, Saskatchewan before that. Long way from Alberta, keeps moving west," he said. "The work does, and you follow it." "I have," he said. He paused, starting to wonder about that. She looked at him for a moment with the frank, unembellished assessment that was simply her way. Then she returned to the ledger. "I'll have a contract draft ready by Thursday," she said. "Come by at 9. He said he would. He left. And Josephine stood at the standing desk for a moment after the door closed, then turned back to her cutting orders. She was a practical woman. She did not spend time interpreting things that might mean nothing, but she did find, that afternoon, that the accounts required slightly more of her concentration than usual. He came back Thursday as agreed. The contract was ready. It was thorough and clearly written, with none of the vague language that invites disputes, and Everett read it carefully, which she observed him doing, and found it accurate to their conversation, which she had not doubted but had been prepared for him to doubt. He came back the following Tuesday, not for the contract, which was signed and settled. He came for reasons he explained as a question about delivery timing for the first shipment, which Josephine answered in under 2 minutes, at which point there was a brief and noticeable silence. "Anything else?" she said. "I don't need anything else," he said with the straightforwardness of someone who has decided not to pretend otherwise. "I was in town and I thought I'd stop." She looked at him with the expression of someone who is deciding how to receive a thing. "It's a working mill," she said finally. "People stop for reasons." "I had a reason," he said. "It wasn't the delivery timing." He bought a small bundle of shingle samples he did not need, said good afternoon, and left. Harrow Creek noticed, because Harrow Creek noticed everything. By the end of the second week, it was known that the railway man came to Hartwell Lumber on days when no railway business required it. By the third week, he and Josephine had been seen twice on the main street at the end of the business day, walking in the direction of the creek at a pace that did not suggest either of them had somewhere else to be. Harrow Creek formed its opinion about this with the speed of a town that has had long practice forming opinions. It was Muriel Fenn, who ran the dry goods shop next to the post office and who held Josephine in the particular regard of a woman who has watched another woman make sensible choices and hoped she would continue to do so, who said it most directly. She said it to Josephine on a Wednesday morning when Josephine came in for thread. "He seems a decent sort," Muriel said, measuring off the thread with the focus of someone whose hands know their work so well the mind is free to say other things. "But these survey men don't stay, Joe. They go where the work goes. I know how survey work operates," Josephine said. "I'm sure you do," Muriel said. "I just want you to be careful." "I'm always careful," Josephine said. "You're particular," Muriel said, which was meant kindly. "That's not quite the same thing." Josephine took her thread and went back to the mill. She thought about what Muriel had said. She thought about it the way she thought about anything. Directly, without deciding, she already knew the conclusion before she had examined it. She was aware of the risk. She was aware of it in the precise way she was aware of all risks that were real. It was Everett who addressed it first. On the evening they walked along the frozen edge of Harrow Creek in the early dark of March, which in northern Alberta is still very dark and very cold and very honest about what it is. They had walked this way twice before. It had become, without being named as such, a thing they did. "You've been thinking about something," he said. He did not say it as an accusation. He said it the way someone says a thing they've noticed and believe is worth acknowledging. "I think about most things," she said. "This particular something has been visible for about a week." She was quiet for a moment. The creek made its sounds under the ice at the edges, where the current ran below the freeze. "Muriel Fenn told me you won't stay," she said. "The survey work moves." "It has," he said. 4 years of it and—" He stopped walking. She stopped too and turned to look at him in the thin light from the far bank. "And I've been doing this work since I was 26, he said, "and I am 33 now, and the part that made sense about moving from province to province is starting to matter less than the part that would make sense about stopping." "That's not quite an answer," she said. "The answer," he said, "depends on things I don't know yet." She looked at him. "Such as, whether what I think is happening here is actually happening," he said, "or whether I'm reading a contract with terms that aren't on the page." She looked at the creek. The moon was up now over the pines on the far bank, and the ice along the edges caught it in a way that was white and cold and clean. "Ask me something specific," she said. "I don't do well with general." "Are you interested," he said, "in a person who would need some time to arrange his life differently than he has arranged it?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "That depends," she said, "on whether the rearranging is genuine or theoretical." "Genuine," he said. "I don't have much use for theoretical." She nodded once. It was not a grand gesture. It was the nod of a woman who has made a decision and does not require ceremony to make it real. "Then yes," she said. "I'm interested." They walked back in the kind of silence that is not uncomfortable, the kind that happens between people who have said the important things and do not need to fill the space afterwards. April came to Harrow Creek with the particular violence of a northern Alberta spring, which is not the gentle warming of more southerly places, but a sudden, aggressive thaw that turns the roads to mud and the creek to a rushing brown torrent and requires everyone to simply endure it and trust that the other side is dry ground. Everett's survey work moved with the season, which meant longer days and longer absences into the bush, sometimes for 3 or 4 days at a time when the crew was working the remote sections. He came back to Harrow Creek each time. He made no announcement of this. He simply came back. They spent the spring evenings in the mill office, which had a good stove and a lamp on the desk, and an atmosphere of practical comfort that suited both of them. She showed him the accounting system she had built and the contract structure she had developed and the timber grading method she had worked out from a reference manual and 5 years of her own observation. He found these things genuinely interesting, which she noticed, and which was not nothing. She showed him the ledger she had kept since her first year running the mill, the entries in the cramped, careful hand of a woman teaching herself to be precise, and the way the handwriting had changed over the years, as the certainty behind it grew. He told her about Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and the particular loneliness of advance work, which put you in every town before you knew anyone in it, and took you out again before you could become someone they remembered. He told her about the creek outside Saskatoon, where he had sat on a rock one October and looked at the water for a long time and thought, for the first time, that he was tired of moving. That had been 18 months ago. He had kept moving anyway because the work was there and because stopping required knowing where to stop. "How do you know where?" Josephine said. "I didn't," he said, "until recently." She did not respond to that directly. She was not a woman who responded to things directly when the indirect was more honest. The town of Harrow Creek observed all of this with the lively interest of a community that has watched Josephine Hartwell be too particular for 7 years, and has now been given something considerably more interesting to watch. Opinions divided. Some people thought the railway man was decent enough, but that Josephine would find a way to be dissatisfied. Some people thought that Josephine was finally going to do something sensible, and that the railway man seemed to have enough sense to appreciate her. Muriel Fenn, who had more information than most, kept her own counsel, which was unusual for her, and which Josephine noticed and appreciated without commenting on it. It was Douglas, the mill foreman, who said the plainest thing. He said it one morning in May when Everett had come by the mill early, and he and Josephine had been visible through the office window, standing at the desk and looking at the same document with the ease of two people who have learned each other's space. Douglas said it to Josephine later when Everett had gone back to the survey camp. "He looks at you like you know what you're doing," Douglas said. "I do know what I'm doing," Josephine said. "I know that," Douglas said. "Most men don't notice it the way he does. Most men see it and feel something complicated about it." He went back to his work. "Just something I observed." Josephine thought about this for the rest of the day. The moment that changed things happened on a Saturday in June, which in northern Alberta is the beginning of the long light, the weeks when the sun barely sets and the evenings last until 10, and the whole country feels like it is trying to show you everything it has before the dark comes back. Everett came to the mill that morning with his horse and a request. The survey crew had measured a ridge to the northeast, 2 hours' ride, that had a particular quality he wanted her to see. The timber stands up. There were old growth, some of the last in the region, and the railway route was going to skirt them rather than cut through, which was his recommendation and which had been accepted. He thought she should see them before the season changed, and the access became difficult. "Why me?" she said, not suspiciously, genuinely. "Because you know timber," he said, "and because I think you'd want to see them." She looked at him. "When? Now, if you're willing. We'd be back by dark." She told Douglas she'd be out for the day. Douglas said nothing, but there was a quality to his silence that communicated something. They rode northeast through the long June morning, through the second growth stands and the beaver meadows and the sections of muskeg that required going around rather than through. Everett knew the route from the survey work and led them without hesitation. Josephine rode well, which he did not comment on because it did not need commenting on. She had not ridden this country in 2 years, not since the autumn her father's eyes had failed, and she had stopped taking the time. She had not realized how much she had missed it until the pines opened up around them, and the sky came wide over the ridge, and the smell of the northern forest in June, which is its own particular thing, hit her somewhere specific in the chest. "You're smiling," Everett said. "I forgot about this," she said, not to him exactly, to herself, but out loud because she had found that she could be out loud around him. "The country? The size of it," she said. "You can't see the size of it from town." They came over the ridge at mid-morning and the old growth was there. Josephine pulled up her horse and looked. Old growth timber in northern Alberta has a quality that managed forest does not. It is not simply big, although it is big. Some of these trees 3 feet across at the base and rising 80 feet before the first branch. It is the way they stand. The spacing between them, which is the result of a century, of the strongest trees outlasting the rest, creates a particular kind of light. The June sun came down through them in columns, and the understory was quiet, and the whole stand had the stillness of something that has been exactly itself for a very long time. They were going to route through here, Everett said. He was not boasting, he was simply telling her. The original survey line cut through the center of this stand. I walked it and put in the recommendation to shift the route 3 miles east. It adds time to the build schedule. "The company accepted that?" she said. After some discussion, he said. "I was prepared to be firm about it." She looked at the trees. She thought about the mill. She thought about the timber she had graded and sold and shipped for 5 years, and she understood in a different way, standing here, the difference between timber and this. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing me here. I thought you'd want to see it," he said. "I was right about that." She looked at him sideways. "You usually are about what's worth seeing." "I have a reasonable record," he said. "That's a quality," she said. "That could make a person insufferable." "It could," he agreed, "if the person was using it to be right about things that didn't matter. I try to be right about things that do." She turned her horse, so she was facing him directly in the column light coming through the old trees. She looked at Everett Crane with the full attention of a woman who has learned to evaluate things carefully and who has been evaluating this particular thing for 4 months. "Everett," she said. "Yes," he said. "What are you doing?" she said, specifically. He looked at her with the amber steadiness that was simply his way. "I'm telling you," he said, "that I've been in 7 towns in 4 years, and you are the first person I've met in any of them who I'd rearrange my life for." He paused. "I'm asking if that's something you'd consider." She held his gaze. The old trees stood around them in their patient, unhurried way. The June light came down through them in columns, and somewhere on the ridge a gray jay called once, and was quiet. "You'd have to stop moving," she said. "I know," he said. "The survey work moves. There's other work," he said. "Supply contracting, local logistics. I have skills that don't require me to leave the province every season." He paused. "I've looked into it." "You've looked into it," she said. "I'm methodical," he said. "You knew that." She had known that. She had known it since Thursday of the first week, when he read the contract carefully and asked one precise question and signed it. She looked at the trees one more time. She thought about the shape of the thing she had not found and had stopped expecting to find in Harrow Creek, and she thought about the fact that she was in the northern Alberta backcountry looking at old-growth timber with a man who had rerouted a railway line to preserve it and who had then thought to bring her here to see it. "Yes," she said, "I'd consider it." She said it plainly, the way she said most things. But her voice had a quality in it that was not her usual voice, and they both knew it, and neither of them said anything about it, and the old trees stood in their patient way around them in the long June light. They rode back to Harrow Creek in the late afternoon and arrived as the long northern evening was settling in. Harrow Creek noticed them ride in together and adjusted its running assessment of the situation accordingly. The summer moved at the pace that summers move when a person has something worth moving toward. Everett completed the survey season and put in his notice with the railway company in August, which generated paperwork and a certain amount of professional negotiation, and which he handled with the methodical competence that Josephine had by now come to expect from him, and that she found, in a person she trusted, was simply a reliable pleasure. He established a small freight and logistics operation in Harrow Creek that fall, working with the mill and 2 other local businesses to manage the supply contracts that had previously been handled inefficiently from Edmonton. The work suited him. He was good at it. And he had, in Harrow Creek, the quality he had not had in 7 towns over 4 years, which was somewhere worth coming home to at the end of the day. They were married in October, a quiet ceremony at the church on the north end of town. Josephine had no interest in elaborate, and Everett had no patience for unnecessary, and the combination produced exactly the wedding that both of them wanted. Harrow Creek attended, as Harrow Creek attended everything, with the additional attentiveness of a community that has watched a woman be too particular for the better part of a decade, and has now been given the considerable satisfaction of seeing what she was being particular about. Muriel Fenn cried, which she would have denied if asked, and which everyone present observed. Douglas, who attended with his wife and stood near the back as was his preference, said to his wife on the way home that he had known from the morning he saw them standing at the desk together, in May. His wife asked how he had known. He thought about it for a moment and said that the way Everett looked at Josephine when she was explaining the account structure was the way a person looks at something they've been waiting to find. His wife said that was a perceptive thing to notice. Douglas said he'd had a lot of time to observe. Josephine's father, Walter Hartwell, who had watched the whole year from his chair by the front window of the apartment above the mill office with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has hoped for something and is watching it arrive in better form than he had hoped for, sat in the first pew and let the moment be exactly what it was. The two men who had previously proposed to Josephine and found her too particular were both, by this time, in other towns, which was appropriate. Josephine continued to run Hartwell Lumber. She continued to keep the accounts with the same precision she had always kept them, and to order reference materials from Toronto when Harrow Creek did not stock what she needed to know, and to grade timber with the authority of someone who has earned the right to it. She rode out on Saturdays when the season allowed, into the country she had missed, the one that was too big to see from town. Everett often rode with her. Sometimes they went north, toward the ridge. The old growth stand was still there. The railway curved east of it by 3 miles, as Everett had recommended, as the company had accepted, as the trees did not know and did not need to know. They simply continued to be what they had always been. Harrow Creek revised its opinion about Josephine Hartwell over the following year, in the way that small towns revise their opinions, without ceremony, without any acknowledgement that a revision was taking place, simply by the gradual replacement of one set of comments with another. The new set said that she had known what she was doing all along, that she had simply been waiting for the right match, that it was obvious, in retrospect, that Josephine Hartwell had never been too particular. She had been exactly particular enough. The town said this with the approval that communities give to people who have ended up in the right place, and with the comfortable forgetfulness of communities that do not remember being the ones who said otherwise. Josephine, for her part, did not spend any time on the revision. She had work to do. She had a mill to run, and accounts to keep, and a country to ride through on Saturday mornings, with a man who had rerouted a railway for a grove of trees and then thought to bring her to see it. She had been particular about what she was looking for. It had simply taken the right person to show her she hadn't been wrong about any of it.